150 people applied for a single rental unit in Northbridge. One person got it, the other 149 are still looking. Some of them have full-time jobs. Some of them earn above the median wage. Some of them are you. In Perth right now, the inner city vacancy rate sits at 0.5%, the lowest of any capital city in the country. Raiwa, SQM Research 2026. That is not a tight market. That is a sealed door with one key and 150 people standing outside it. Tonight we are going to find out how this actually works, not the press release version, not the interest rates are coming down version. The real version through one woman's story, in one suburb, in one of Australia's most locked out rental markets. Her name is Mei Ling Johansson. She is 31. She works at a hospital, and she is one of the 149. Most days, Mei Ling Johansson finishes her shift at 6 in the morning. She drives home through Northbridge as the streets are still waking up. The cafes are pulling up their shutters. A delivery truck is blocking the bike lane on Lake Street. And Mei Ling is thinking the way she always thinks on that drive about the apartment listings that went live overnight. She is 31 years old. She is a pharmacy technician at Sir Charles Gairdner Hospital, one of the busiest public hospitals in Western Australia. She has worked there for 7 years. She earns $67,000 a year, which is a real wage for a real job, not a side hustle, not a gig, not a contract role that disappears in March. On Sunday mornings, when she is not working, she likes to walk through Hyde Park and buy a coffee from the Portuguese place near the corner. She has done this since she was 24, when she first moved to Perth with 2 suitcases and a 6-month lease in a share house in Leederville. She did not expect, at 31, to still be worried about where she would sleep next year. 3 weeks ago, Mei Ling applied for a unit in Northbridge, 1 bedroom, $650 a week, 6th floor. It had a small balcony facing east, which she remembers because she thought about the light. She was applicant number 78. There were 150 applications in total. She did not get the unit. She was not told why. Under Western Australia's current rental laws, landlords are not required to give a reason for rejection, and there is no appeal pathway. Rental Reforms 2025-26, she found out via a form email that said, simply, "Thank you for your application. On this occasion, we have proceeded with another applicant." That email arrived at 5:47 a.m. She was already at work. This is Mei Ling's story, and it might be yours too. Let's go back 6 years. Because to understand where Mei Ling is now, you need to understand how hard she has actually tried. In 2020, Mei Ling started saving, deliberately. She cut her share house costs by moving further from the hospital 40 minutes on the bus instead of 15. She set up an automatic transfer every fortnight. She started tracking her rent-to-income ratio in a spreadsheet she still has on her phone. She was doing everything right. This is important. Every piece of advice she had been given by her bank, by her parents, by every financial content creator she had ever followed, she was following it. By early 2022, she had saved $18,000. She was proud of that number. And then she started actually looking at what $18,000 meant in the Perth market. Here is the problem with saving while a market moves. In 2020, the median house price in Perth was approximately $476,000. CoreLogic 2020. By early 2026, that same median had reached $785,000. CoreLogic 2026. That is a $309,000 increase in 6 years, while Mei Ling was saving as hard as she could. She saved roughly $6,000 a year. The market moved roughly $51,000 a year. She was running toward a finish line that was moving away from her at 8 times her speed. But here is something that did not show up in any headline. Mei Ling was not even trying to buy. She had accepted several years ago that buying was not currently realistic on her salary. She was trying to rent stably, affordably, in a place that was hers, so that she could keep saving without being moved on every 12 months. And that, it turned out, was just as difficult. In Perth right now, the median days on market for a rental property is 16 days. REIWA, May 2026. 16 days from listing to leased. That means if you work shifts, if you cannot do a 12 p.m. inspection on a Tuesday because you are dispensing medications at a hospital, you will miss it. Not because you were not good enough, because you were at work. Mei Ling has missed 12 inspections in the past 8 months because of shift conflicts. We will come back to why this keeps happening and why the way inspections are scheduled is not an accident. In October 2025, Mei Ling's landlord gave notice that the property she was renting in Mount Lawley would be listed for sale. She had 60 days to find somewhere else. She applied for 11 rentals in those 60 days. She was rejected from all 11. No reasons given. No explanation. Under WA's current framework, none was required. She was not behind on rent. She had a perfect rental history. She had a letter from her employer confirming stable income. None of that mattered, because under current Western Australian law, a landlord can choose any applicant they want, for any reason they want, and they do not have to tell you what that reason was. WA Rental Reforms 2025-26. She moved in with a cousin in Morley for 6 weeks. By January 2026, Mei Ling was back on the market. She had a new strategy. Apply for everything in her budget, be first to every inspection, submit a rental resume with a cover letter, a rental resume with a cover letter. She had started writing these because someone in a Facebook group for Perth renters said it helped. She is a pharmacy technician with a stable hospital job, 6 years of rental history, and 0 late payments, and she was writing a cover letter to live somewhere. If that does not tell you something about the power dynamic in this rental market, I am not sure what will. In February 2026, the Northbridge listing went up. 1 bedroom, $650 a week. 150 applicants. 1 outcome. She was applicant 78. She still does not know what applicant 1 looked like. Here is the question that has been sitting unanswered since the start of this video. 150 people applied for 1 unit. That is not normal. That is not even a tight market. So, what is actually happening inside that number, and who, exactly, is winning these applications? We will come back to that, because the answer is not what you have been told. In March 2026, Mei Ling was still in Morley. She extended her stay with her cousin by another month. She is now paying $300 a week in informal rent, which her cousin did not ask for but which Mei Ling insisted on because she is not someone who takes without giving back. She still applies for rentals every week. She still misses inspections because of shift work. She still receives form emails that thank her for her application. She has not given up. But she is tired in the way that people get tired when a system keeps producing the same result, no matter how hard they work within it. Remember when Mei Ling missed 12 inspections in 8 months because of shift conflicts? Here is why that is not a coincidence. Property managers in Perth typically schedule inspections during business hours between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. on weekdays because that is operationally easiest for their teams. There is no legal requirement to offer evening or weekend inspections. Consumer Protection, WA 2026. There is no mechanism that compels landlords or agents to accommodate non-standard work hours. For someone working 6 a.m., 2 p.m. hospital shifts on a rotating roster, those inspection windows are almost entirely inaccessible without taking unpaid leave. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, approximately 16% of employed Australians work shift or irregular hours, a figure that rises sharply in healthcare and essential services, ABS Labour Force Survey 2025. These are stable, reliable workers by any standard. They are systematically disadvantaged in rental markets, not because of their finances, but because of when they work. Mei Ling is not an outlier. She is a data point in a system designed around a 9-to-5 default. This matters because Mei Ling has exactly the employment profile that landlords say they want. Stable, public sector, 7 years at the same employer, and she still cannot get to the inspection. The system does not filter for reliability. It filters for availability. And those are not the same thing. Remember that 150 applicant listing. Remember the question, who is applicant number 1? Here is what the data shows about rental competition in Perth's inner suburbs. Perth's inner city vacancy rate is 0.5%, REWA, SQM Research 2026. At that level, demand so comprehensively outstrips supply that landlords and property managers have no incentive to optimize for fairness, they optimize for speed and certainty. The applicant who wins is typically the one who can offer a higher weekly rent, a longer lease term, a larger advance deposit, or proof of income that is immediately verifiable, such as a payslip from a single employer rather than a casual or multi-income arrangement. In short, if you have a salary package that photographs well on a bank statement, if you can pay 3 months up front, if you can sign a 2-year lease, you move to the top of the pile. Mei Ling can meet the rent. But she cannot easily compete with someone who offers to pay 3 months in advance out of savings she does not yet have. She spent those savings trying to build a deposit for a house she cannot buy. How did Perth get to 0.5% vacancy? Western Australia's population grew by approximately 3.1% in 2024, the highest growth rate of any state. ABS estimated resident population 2024. That growth was driven by interstate migration, skilled visa arrivals, and a mining sector that recovered strongly from 2022 onwards. New rental supply did not keep pace. Building approvals in WA declined sharply through 2023 and into 2024 as construction costs rose and labour shortages hit the residential sector. HIA Residential Building Survey 2025. The result? A pipeline of new homes that was smaller, slower, and more expensive to deliver than the demand it needed to absorb. The gap between demand and supply, the gap that produced 150 applicants for one Northbridge unit, was not caused by a single bad policy or a single bad actor. It was the compounding result of population growth, insufficient planning, constrained construction, and a rental regulatory framework that was never designed for this level of competition. Mei Ling does not need a lecture in economics. She needs somewhere to live, but understanding the mechanism matters. Because right now, a lot of people in her position are being told implicitly and explicitly that they are losing rental applications because of something they are doing wrong, because their cover letter needs work, because their rental history needs to be presented differently. That framing is wrong, and it is doing harm. Western Australia introduced rental reform legislation in 2025-26. The reforms included some meaningful changes, limits on rent increase frequency, new minimum habitability standards, but they did not touch the two things that matter most to applicants like Mei Ling. First, landlords retain the right to reject applicants without providing reasons and without any appeal pathway. WA Rental Reforms 2025-26. In a 0.5% vacancy market, this means an applicant can be rejected 150 times and never know why and never have any recourse. Second, the reforms did not address rental bidding, the informal practice where applicants voluntarily offer above the advertised rent to improve their chances. This practice is not illegal in WA, it is common, and it structurally disadvantages anyone whose budget is exactly at the advertised price, which is where Mei Ling sits at $650, $700 a week. REWA May 2026. There is a number that housing economists use to assess rental stress. It is called the rent-to-income ratio. The standard threshold for rental stress is spending more than 30% of gross income on rent. Ahari 2024. Mei Ling earns $67,000 a year. That is $1,288 per week gross, approximately $1,060 net after tax. A $650 a week Northbridge unit represents 50.4% of her gross income, 61% of her net income. Not stress, suffocation. And yet that is the going rate for an inner city Perth rental right now. Not a luxury apartment, not a heritage terrace. A one-bedroom unit in a mid-density block. She earns a real salary for a real job that this city genuinely cannot function without, and the rental market has priced her into the category of person the system was not designed to accommodate. 16 days That is how long the average rental property in Perth stays on the market before it is leased. Raiwa, May 2026. 16 days is not enough time for someone working rotating hospital shifts to identify the listing, arrange to view it, gather documents, submit an application, and be processed ahead of 149 other people who submitted before them. The inspection scheduling issue is real. But the deeper issue is that 16-day median. In a functioning rental market, vacancy rates above 3% give applicants enough time and enough options that missing one inspection does not mean starting over. In a 0.5% vacancy market, missing one inspection might mean missing your last realistic option in a given suburb for the next 6 weeks. Here is where Mei Ling is now. She is still in Morley. She has applied for 19 rentals since October. She is still employed, still saving, still writing cover letters for rental applications. She has decided to expand her search radius. She is looking at Bayswater, Maylands, Guildford, further from the hospital, longer commute, smaller balconies. She has not given up, but she has stopped believing that trying harder is the variable that matters most. That is the real lesson of this story, and it is not the one the system wants you to take. 3 things worth knowing. 1, if you are currently a renter in a low vacancy market, document everything, every application, every rejection, every inspection you attended. This documentation matters if WA's regulatory environment changes and there is genuine policy movement toward requiring reasons for rejection in several states. Your records are evidence for that future. 2, the rent-to-income ratio is a real metric, not a guideline. If your rent exceeds 30% of your gross income, you are in rental stress by any established definition, Ahuri 2024. That is not a personal failure. That is a measurement. Use it in conversations with your employer about wage structures, with your union, with your local member. Name it accurately. 3, the practice of voluntary rent bidding offering above asking price is legal in WA and it is distorting the market. If enough applicants refuse to participate in it, the practice loses its power. It requires collective behaviour that is genuinely hard to coordinate. But it starts with knowing it exists and naming it for what it is. A mechanism that transfers money from renters to landlords in a market where renters already have no leverage. Mei Ling does not know yet where she will be living in 6 months. She is not falsely optimistic about that. But she is clear about something. The outcome of her rental search is not a reflection of her effort, her reliability, or her worth as a tenant. It is a reflection of a market that was allowed to reach 0.5% vacancy and a regulatory framework that was written before anyone imagined it could. I want to ask you one question before you go. If you are renting right now, what is your rent-to-income ratio? Not approximately, exactly. Divide your weekly rent by your weekly gross income. Multiply by 100. If that number is above 30, you are in rental stress. You are not alone in that. And knowing the number is the first step to talking about it accurately. Leave it in the comments. Let's see what this audience is actually carrying.